Teased for what felt like 2 full years, the 6th generation Altima came with all-wheel drive. The only other mid-sized consumer sedan sold in North America with that option is the Subaru Legacy. So you'd think, especially in a market like Canada and specifically like Quebec, where we have really bad winters, a vehicle like this would sell very well. But now that the Altima is larger, offers all-wheel drive, and has more tech and features over the previous generation, does this vehicle make more sense over a crossover? And does it make more sense over the now smaller Nissan Maxima? Our spotlight is on this 2020 Nissan Altima Platinum all-wheel drive. With an MSRP of $35,298 Canadian, it is a very affordable way to get all-wheel drive, considering there are only 3 trims sold here in Canada, and all of them come with all-wheel drive. We're going to be going over absolutely everything you need to know about this American-assembled mid-size family sedan. Yes, the Nissan Altima. It's not the sexiest name when it comes to the mid-sized consumer segment, and I should know, we used to own a 2010 Altima, and I really didn't like the car. In fact, I hated it so much, it turned me off from the brand completely until we started doing the new cars here on Test Drive. But now in its 6th generation, it has a lot going for it compared to the competition, specifically something like the Subaru Legacy, now that this is the only other vehicle in North America, and specifically Canada, that has all-wheel drive as an option. Certainly there's a lot of rumors something like the Mazda 6 might be getting all-wheel drive, but right now, what you can buy in this country that isn't a premium or luxury car, this and the Legacy are it. Now, I mentioned that there are 3 trims sold here in Canada. In the States, there are a number of other ones, along with front-wheel drive only, all-wheel drive, and Nissan's new 2-liter variable compression turbocharged engine. We do not get that engine here in Canada. This is just the regular 2.5-liter inline 4. So you do have more options in the States, and it makes sense. There are less people here in Canada, about 1/10 of the size of the US population, so it makes sense for them to offer less trims. And we'll talk about the sales numbers in a minute and why it was probably a smart move on Nissan's part. Now, it's also interesting to note how the prices differ between these vehicles here in Canada and in the United States. Considering this vehicle is assembled in the US, this vehicle is $34,998 base MSRP with the Platinum. We also have a $300 paint option for the red paint. However, in the US, this exact same car, configured the same way, has an MSRP of $33,530 US, and the paint actually costs $395 US. Now, if we convert that, if you were to buy this car in Canada with US dollars, you're basically spending $26,663 US. If you buy this car in the US with Canadian dollars, you're looking at a whopping $44,909 Canadian. It's almost double the price when you consider it. We saw this the same way when it came to the Kia Stinger, where it is just more financially feasible here in Canada. So it's interesting to note that the MSRPs dollar for dollar are very similar when you factor in the fact that the exchange rate is so different. Our dollar is worth about 75 cents American. It's just more cost effective to buy them here in Canada. But before we do that, I want to talk about how the new Altima compares to the 8th generation Maxima. We are going to be featuring the Maxima next week. We're going to be taking it on a road trip to the United States. It's not really relevant to this video, but we're going to be featuring that vehicle. And the Altima is now bigger in almost every way. The wheelbase on the Altima is 50 millimeters longer. Overall length is 3 millimeters longer. The width is 8 millimeters less on the Altima. Height is 22 millimeters higher, and then when it comes to the interior dimensions, things get very interesting. 21 millimeters less front headroom over the Maxima, but 22 millimeters more rear headroom. Legroom is 29 millimeters less for the front on the Altima, but 25 millimeters better on the back. Shoulder room is also interesting, 39 millimeters more for the front on the Altima, and 35 millimeters more in the rear for the Altima. Front hip room is 15 millimeters greater, and rear hip room is 45 millimeters greater on the Altima. Passenger volume overall, 53 liters more in the Altima, and the cargo volume, what you can put in the trunk, a very important thing if people are actually using this on a daily basis to get groceries, maybe go on trips, 31 liters more on the Altima. And even weight is better, 207 kilograms less when it comes to this fully loaded Altima over the Platinum trim for the Maxima, and the Maxima doesn't even have all-wheel drive. So on paper, I mean, this thing just makes more sense. The base MSRP for the Maxima also starts higher than the fully loaded Altima. So right now, it just doesn't make sense to buy a Maxima unless you absolutely want to have the power. It does still come with a larger engine, and since we don't get the variable compression turbo engine here, that might make more sense too. And I mean, if you really want the four-door sports car, that's the one to go for. But this offers so much more, and it's why I've said on social media, this is the best Altima Nissan has ever made. But it's the best Altima they've ever made. Is it the best car they've ever made? Especially when we compare it to things like the Kia Optima, which was our #1 pick in the midsize consumer segment last year. Or even recently, we featured the 2019 Mazda 6 Signature. When you start to look at those cars, maybe it doesn't really stack up as well. This is certainly a lot better than every previous generation of the Altima, but the sales are slow. I'm talking really slow. So far for 2019, they have only sold 1,991 2019-2020 Altimas in Canada. That's down 51.75% from the same time period in 2018. We're going from January 1st to the end of July. We haven't gotten sales yet for August because we're still in the middle of it. But for more than the first half of 2019, sales are down exponentially. That's not good considering this has all-wheel drive, and it didn't sell super well during the winter months either. So why is something like the Altima not doing very well, especially over last year? While the 2.5-liter dual overhead cam inline-4 comes with direct injection and a continuously variable valve timing setup, but only has 182 horsepower, 178 pound-feet of torque. We've started to see a lot more power going into the mid-size sedan segment. Honda Accord, even with the 1.5-liter, has a lot going for it. Kia Optima, Toyota Camry, they all have more power, and the fact that they only offer this could be a deal killer for a lot of people who just want to have a little bit more power. You also have their Xtronic CVT, and people just don't like CVTs. They prefer a real automatic transmission or a manual, which just isn't offered anymore in the mid-size segment. But that intelligent all-wheel drive system, that should make people interested in this, right? Especially based on the dimensions, it's quite a bit bigger than the previous generation. People might just have too much Nissan fatigue. They have so many vehicles in their lineup now that this is bigger than the Maxima. So there's probably a little bit of fatigue going on as well. And even though the design looks very good compared to other versions of the Altima, it's still not the sexiest design out there. It's a little conservative, so some people might not like the look of it no matter what. Now let's talk a little bit more about some of the tech and what you get with this trim. It has an independent strut front suspension with a multi-link independent rear, 19-inch aluminum rims, automatic LED headlights with LED fog lights and LED daytime running lights, active grille shutters, blind spot warning, rear cross traffic alert, intelligent forward collision warning, Nissan's ProPILOT Assist, which is only available on the new Leaf and the Nissan Rogue. You also get emergency brake with pedestrian detection, lane keep assist, traffic sign recognition, hill start assist, driver attention, and rear parking sensors with rear intelligent braking. So like a lot of the other cars we've started to test, where it'll automatically stop you if it thinks it's going to hit something in reverse, this car has it. But there are things that you just don't get with this car compared to the competition, such as heated windshield wipers or integrated nozzles in the wiper blades themselves. You also don't have a panoramic sunroof, just a regular sunroof. No power folding mirrors, but you do have a 360-degree camera system. We did test that on the Rogue, and the image quality is very low. The headlights, while they're LED and do very well to illuminate the road, they aren't adaptive. So I mean, the tech is there, but it's not quite as good as a lot of the competition. How about the interior though? It has received a major overhaul. I find that there is some Mazda styling in there. I think they took some inspiration from the new Mazda 6. Even the previous generation one, the interior has certainly gotten a big upgrade over the previous gen. You have their zero gravity leather seats, which really gives you a phenomenal driving experience. If you haven't sat in any of their zero gravity seats, I highly recommend it. Nissan says that they have achieved perfect neutral seating position when it comes to the seats, and I can feel the difference. When you get into it, it almost feels like you're sitting on nothing at all. Very supportive with tons of cushioning. They quite possibly are the best mid-size sedan seats that we've tested. They are available on the Maxima that we're going to be testing next week. You have front heat with them, a heated steering wheel, 2 memory options for the driver, 8-way power adjustment for the driver with 2 lumbar support, and 4-way power for the passenger. You have a dual zone automatic climate control system, an 8-inch infotainment system. It does feel a little dated, but it's not bad compared to the competition. But you have navigation, traffic, Sirius XM, Apple CarPlay, and Android Auto. So if you don't like the navigation system, you could just use your phone and plug it in. Again, 360-degree camera works, but the quality is a little low. You have a 7-inch information computer cluster, which works pretty well, accent lighting, and you also have HomeLink. Now I mentioned again what the competition has to offer. This car doesn't have a color HUD, doesn't use Napa leather, doesn't have LED interior lighting, it doesn't have heated rear seats or ventilated front seats or wireless charging or a panoramic sunroof. But again, at $35,000 with all-wheel drive, it's right in line with the 2.5-liter Subaru Legacy, and it is much cheaper than the competition fully loaded. So if you're looking at a mid-range, mid-sized consumer car like a Honda Accord or Toyota Camry, this will look pretty good, especially with all-wheel drive. But let's take this vehicle on the road, talk about how it performs and handles and everything else you need to know about it to see if this might be the next mid-size sedan for you. After a very, very long, tiring day, I was out for almost 4 hours doing yard work today. Getting into the zero gravity seats is so nice. I mean, it's just very comfortable in here. I personally like them. I can tell that there's a difference over regular seats when it comes to this. I'm not a huge expert when it comes to things like the neutral position for seating, but I can tell you as an amateur when it comes to sitting down, I am very comfortable in here. My wife doesn't like them that much. She acknowledges that they do feel different, but for her, being a much smaller person, she just doesn't see the benefit to it. But honestly, I think that this would be a very good long-term seating position, and we are going to be talking about that next week, as we mentioned with the Maxima. But what else can I tell you about the drive, ride, and handling of the Altima? It's been a long time since I drove my 2010, and like I said, it wasn't very exciting and really put me off from the brand entirely. The CVT operates just like a CVT would from Nissan. We've talked about it. In fact, we even talked about it specifically with the Juke Nismo that we did a few months back. It's not a very exciting transmission to have. Fuel economy, I suppose, is better because of it. We did very well on our 100-kilometer test loop, despite the fact that this has all-wheel drive. But the transmission is kind of boring. But you do have a sport mode. It's hidden. It's underneath the actual shifter here. It's a little button that doesn't say anything, and it puts it into sport mode. Basically just changes the way that the transmission works a little bit, so it'll keep the gearing a little differently. It'll keep the CVT running a little bit higher RPM depending on how you're driving it. Personally, I have not used it just because most people aren't going to use it. I mean, first of all, if you're picking this car up maybe as a rental, you're not going to know that button exists. So most people aren't going to be using it. But I mean, if you're buying this for a daily driver, you probably don't care a whole lot about power. It's not quick. And we did some driving with myself, my wife, and my 5-year-old. Getting up to speed on the highway, it's a chore. It does not pick up too quick. So that's why a lot of cars now, they're adding a second option for the engine. It would have been nice if we had the VC turbo on this car. However, it's only available with the front wheel drive version of the Altima in the States. And I think that Nissan really wanted to promote the fact that this has all-wheel drive. You have most of the enhanced safety tech as well as ProPILOT Assist. We talked about that more in depth when we did the Rogue, when you have to put it on every time you start the car up and then switch your little cluster computer back to whatever you had before. And it'll do things like keep you in the middle of the lane. It's ideal if you're doing it on the highway. It's not recommended on back roads or county roads. If you take a sharp turn, it's not going to adjust quickly enough for it, and it is still a hands-on system. I wouldn't even consider it a very mild autonomous system because it doesn't really do anything more than lane keep assist and forward collision warning with the adaptive cruise control. So you have to keep your hands on the wheel. It will warn you after maybe about 10-15 seconds that you aren't holding on to it. And it uses the same system that we've talked about before, where it's looking for feedback on the steering motor. And if you're on a straight, narrow road, that can be a problem because the car isn't going to be turning. You're not going to have to correct the steering. And even if your hands are on the wheel, it might yell at you and say, you need to put your hands on the wheel. And I find that with a lot of systems, where even if you're going straight, you've got your hands on the wheel, you have to kind of give it these little movements in order to make sure that it thinks you're holding on, even if you are. But I'll tell you, I am surprised by the drive and ride of this. I wouldn't say that I'm impressed with it, but it did surprise me. I wasn't expecting a whole lot from it. And again, that's coming from the older generation, but I have to say that it does drive pretty well. It's smooth enough on the roads here. The handling is actually really good, very light steering feel. So if you're looking for a vehicle that isn't going to give you a ton of fatigue, both from a seating perspective as well as the actual act of driving the vehicle, this might actually be a pretty good option for you. I'm surprised that it is so light and easy to drive around, given the fact that there isn't a whole lot of power for it. They have refined sort of the ride and driving experience of it to make it as comfortable as possible. It depends on what you want out of the experience. It's not going to be the enthusiast's choice when it comes to a vehicle. You know, it's not going to be the four-door sports sedan. It's just a car, right? Very similar to what we talk about when we do vehicles from Subaru, where they are just a car. It's nothing exceptional. It really is a very good Altima. It is the best Altima that we've driven. But when we think back to things like the Accord or the Optima or the Camry, they all offer great things and a lot of tech and a lot of innovation, especially for the price. You get a lot for it, and especially the power. With this, it's really claim to fame now is all-wheel drive. That's what they're offering, is all-wheel drive. And if that's all you care about, then you can get the base model, you can get all-wheel drive, and you've got it on a mid-size car. But if you want more, if you want a little bit more tech, then you're going to have to go up. If you want maybe an air conditioning system that actually stays at the temperature you've set it to, I've had to adjust this thing like crazy, you're going to want to go for something else. If you want a premium audio system that actually performs to a premium level, then you'll want something else, because the Bose speaker system on this, it's a 9-speaker audio system. There's just no controls for it. You have bass and treble and fade. That's about it. There's no surround options. There's nothing else to control it. It's pretty basic, especially by Bose standards. And Nissan really does have loyal customers. If you're coming from a 5th generation Altima, the design is kind of similar, but it's obviously been updated. Interior, it's a good layout, everything works, it's functional. If you're coming from the 4th generation, it will be a big upgrade for you. And like I said, that's the last one that I drove on a regular basis. We have driven the 5th generation since then. But I mean, it does what it's supposed to do. It's definitely not the class leader. It's far to be the worst car. I mean, even today, there's really not bad cars out there. Everything works for somebody. And if you are coming from another Nissan product, you're coming from an older Altima, the chances are you're going to like this one. If you want something that is no fuss, nothing over the top, nothing too fancy, you're going to like this too. If you want all-wheel drive, this is a great option. But if you want the best, there's a lot of other choice out there.
The 2020 Nissan Altima completed our 100-kilometer test loop in a magical 6.7 liters per 100 kilometers, or 35 US miles per gallon. By comparison, the Mazda 6 Signature did 7.4 liters per 100 kilometers, and the Kia Stinger GT line did 7.6 liters per 100 kilometers. During our 515-kilometer week, we achieved 7.9 liters per 100 kilometers, or 30 mpg. So fuel economy kicks off our list for likes for the Altima, followed by the extremely comfortable zero-gravity seats, simple trim offerings in Canada, all-wheel drive as standard for our market, and the overall interior space and dimensions which exceed those of the Maxima. But how about dislikes? The Altima's engine and CVT combo is a letdown with slow acceleration under light to medium load and a sport mode that doesn't help alleviate that. We also experienced a lot of problems with the HVAC system, where we needed to constantly adjust the temperature to avoid sub-zero air conditioning coming on whenever the outside air temperature rose by just 1 degree. The 9-speaker Bose audio system doesn't provide much control and sounds weak compared to other premium systems we've tested, and cup holders provide no grip for cups and a shallow depth, meaning front passengers need to keep a free hand on their beverages in order to keep them from tipping over. We talked about the Canadian sales data for 2019 to date. The US market is looking a little stronger since the start of the year. The 120,013 Altimas sold in 2019 is down 14.6% over the 139,807 sold during the same time period in 2018, with the best month being May with over 24,000 units sold, and the biggest positive change coming in April with a 59% increase over the 2018 sales numbers. Buyers still don't seem to be sold on the new Altima even in the US based on those numbers. We've outlined a number of reasons why this vehicle might not be selling well in Canada, but what are your thoughts? Is the Altima just offering too little in terms of features and tech? Is the all-wheel drive overrated even in Canada? Let us know in the comments below and chime in with your opinion.